Welcome back everyone, I'm Nick. This video we are talking about lists. And a list is basically a VStack where we have a bunch of items in a list, but the power of a list comes into play when we want to start modifying its items. So if we want to swipe to delete an item, or if we want to start moving items around, the list makes that super easy and convenient for us. So basically a list is kind of like a specialized VStack, except it has a couple extra features for editing the items inside, and it also formats a little differently. So I'll show you guys how we can format lists to make them look professional and usable in our apps. All right, so we are back in our Xcode project, and let's right click the navigator, create a new file as we always do. It's going to be a SwiftUI view. So most of the videos so far in this course have been talking about a single component, and we have just added a text or a shape or a VStack to the screen. But as we're now starting to get better and more comfortable at SwiftUI, we can start building on each of these components to kind of make full screens. So in this video, we are going to talk about lists, but we're also going to use a lot of the techniques and components that we've previously learned. So if you get confused about anything that we're adding in this course, for example, we're going to add a navigation view. I've already done previous videos on all of these components. So if there's anything that you're confused about, just look for a previous video in this series and you'll be able to understand what we're adding to this screen. So with that said, let's get into coding. So let's start by just adding a list to the screen. So we'll add a list, open the brackets, and within the list we'll cut the text hello world and let's paste it maybe 3 times. And now we can see already on our preview that the list kind of looks like a VStack. It's just going to put each of our items in the list in order, and it actually has this default line in between each item. So we can see this little gray line between each item. So let's start by adding some real values to this list instead of these blank texts. So I'm going to create a data array outside the body here. We'll do @state var, and let's call this fruits. It'll be of type array of string, and we'll set it equal to an array, and let's fill in the array with some starting values. So this is going to be fruits, so we'll do apple, orange, banana. Make sure each of these are strings, banana, and maybe one more fruit, we'll do peach. So now in our list, instead of just having these texts, I'm going to add a for each statement. So we'll do for each. Again, we've done this in a previous video, so if you're confused about any of this, just check out the previous videos in this course. And I'm going to use the ID and content completion so that we can use the ID factor, which I'll show you in a second. And our data is going to be fruits, of course. The ID will be \self. This basically is just getting an ID for each item in this fruit. And then for the content, we'll press enter. And I don't like this completion here, so we're just going to put fruit. So for each fruit, what do we want to add to the screen? We're just going to add a text, and we'll put the fruit name inside. Let's click resume on the canvas to make sure it's all still working. And let's capitalize each letter, so we'll call fruit.capitalized instead, and that looks a little better. And one of the coolest things about the list is the fact that we could group all of the items in our list into sections. So if we wanted this to be maybe a fruits section, and then later on our list we would have a vegetables section or something like that, we could put this content into sections. So we can literally type in section, open the parentheses, and then let's just use the header and the content. We don't need to use the footer right now. Basically, the header and footer work like you expect them to. The footer's at the bottom of the list, the header's at the top of the list. So let's just use the header and the content. And I'm going to put this on a separate line, so we'll press enter before header, enter before content. And in the header, let's just put text, and maybe we'll name this fruits. And in the content, I'm going to click enter, and I'm going to cut this for each statement and put that into the section content. So now we can see in our list already that we have the section title, which is kind of grayed out, and then each of the items in the list. And we can change this formatting if we don't want this grayed out or we want some other styling, and we're going to do that later in this video. But before we get into that, let's look at some of the cooler features in the list. Because so far this list is really nothing special. It kind of just looks like a VStack, and we could have made this whole thing by just using a VStack. But probably the most powerful thing in the list is the ability to move and delete items from the list. So right now we can't swipe to delete an item, but because we're in a list, it's actually super easy to add. So at the bottom of the for each, I'm just going to add a .onDelete function, press enter, and then I'll just leave the code blank for now so we can't actually delete anything yet. But by just adding this one little bit of code here, on our preview we can now actually swipe to delete, and that delete button is going to show up. When we click the delete button, it's not going to do anything because we haven't added any delete code. But realize how easy and amazing that was. By just adding this one line of code, this little modifier, we now have this whole swipe to delete capability. And if we were trying to add this manually to one of our VStacks, it would be difficult and take a long time. So this convenience is awesome. And let's actually configure it so we can delete items. And we can use a very convenient function. We will call fruits, which is the data array that this for each statement is on. And we can just call .remove, and we're going to look for the remove at offsets completion. So let me move down here, remove at offsets. And I'm looking for this at offsets because the at offsets parameter is an index set. And that's actually what we're getting from this onDelete function. So basically when someone swipes to delete on the app, this tells us exactly which row they're swiping at. So all we're going to do is pass that variable into our remove at function. And now we can swipe to delete. So on the preview, I'm going to swipe on the banana, delete it, and it's gone. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, if you've been following this course, you'll know that whenever possible, we try to extract the function logic from the view. So the code in this body here should really be focused on the actual view. It should not be focused on the actual logic when you click a button. So this is the logic when we click the button, and I want to extract that from the body. So underneath the body here, I'm going to add a function, and we've done this in a previous video, but I'll just call it func delete. Open and close the parentheses and open the brackets. And in this delete function, we want to call this fruits.removeAt. So I'm going to copy this and paste it down here. And now, of course, we need an index set in this function because this function doesn't know what this index set is. So I'm going to copy this and just paste it as a parameter in the function. And this will, of course, be of type index set. So now in our onDelete function, instead of calling this directly, we can just call delete, look for our delete, which is the index set, and we'll pass in this index set with a lowercase I here. So now anytime we're looking at our code and we need to look at the actual logic that happens when we click the delete button, instead of having to look in the body, we can just look at this function down here. And we can actually take this one step further. So because in this situation, if we hold the option button and click on the onDelete, we'll see that the perform the action actually accepts an optional parameter of index set. So because this action is looking for an index set and our action has exactly what it's looking for, an index set, we can actually just delete this whole brackets here, this open to close brackets. And in here, I can just add directly delete at index set. And I don't even need to fill in the index set because it knows that it's going to pass in an index set. And since, one step further, we don't actually need to pass a parameter in here, I can just delete these parentheses and just call onDelete perform delete. Now this is kind of a rare situation, but it's super handy for our lists because this is such clean code, right? In our body, all it has is onDelete perform delete, and we still have all of the same logic. So if I resume the canvas, we can still swipe to delete and it will still work. Awesome. Let's take this view a little further. I want to put this list into a navigation view. So how I'm going to do it, I'm going to hold the command button, click on list. I'm going to embed it in a Z-stack, and then I'm going to just change the Z-stack to navigation view. So we could have just typed in navigation view, open the brackets, and then cut and paste the list inside. But it's easier to actually just embed it into some kind of stack and just change out that stack for a navigation view. So that's what we did here. And now that we're in this navigation view, we can actually add a navigation title and buttons like we learned in the last video. So on this list, I'm going to add .navigation title, and let's call this grocery list. So we have our grocery list, and our first section is fruits. Now on the top left of the navigation, I want to add a edit button so that we can edit our list. So let's call .navigation bar items, and we're just going to use the leading at first. So we'll just use the leading item. And there's a convenient built-in button that we can use called the edit button. So we can just type in edit button and open close the parentheses. And now you'll see in our view that first of all, the default formatting on our list has changed, and we see the edit button on the top left. So in our default formatting, the section is now collapsible, which is kind of cool. And when we click the edit button, we can now quickly edit to delete each of these items. Instead of just having to swipe to delete, we also have this new ability to click and delete, and then press done. Now in this edit, you also have the ability to move items if you want. So let's add that ability. So underneath the on delete, let's add .on move. And this works the same way. When you click on move, it first tells us where the starting index was and then where the new offset ended. So when we click the edit button, we now have these little lines on each of our items in the list, and we can move them. Now if I let go and press done, it's actually not going to save, and that's because we don't have any code in our onMove function. So we can again use a very handy function we'll call fruits, which is the data array, .move. And what do you know? The move function has parameters from offsets, which is an index set, to offset, which is an integer. And when we option and click on this perform, we can see that this onMove is giving us an index set and an integer. So this indices must be an index set, and this offset must be an integer. So we can just pass them in. Indices, new offset, and now we have onMove capability. So if I click at it, move these around, I'll put the peach at the top, press done, it now saves, and peach is at the top of our list. Now, just like this on delete, where we have this super short, where we use this shortcut to make it nice and clean, let's take our move function and move it outside the body. So underneath the delete here, let's add func move. Open and close the parentheses, open the brackets. I'm going to copy this move here, this function, paste it in, and it's looking for indices. So let's add indices as a parameter. And this will be of type index set. Then we'll do add a comma, and then it's looking for a new offset, which we'll add as another parameter, and we'll make this of type int. Again, I'm getting these types because if we option and click on the onMove, we can see that we need an index set and an int, which is an index set and an int. So just to walk you guys through the steps again, instead of calling fruits.move here, we can call move, referencing our function at the bottom, and pass in indices and new offset. Again, because these parameters are exactly the same as the perform, we can just get rid of this whole function here and just add move. So just like the delete, we now have this move, and it's referencing our function at the bottom. Our body view looks nice and clean, and when we resume, we still have the ability to edit, move, and save. So this looks awesome. We are almost done. Let's also add a button in the top right corner for maybe adding items. So the navigation bar item, right now we have leading. Let's put it on its own line. And after the leading, we can add comma space trailing, and then put our own button in here. So I'm going to put the trailing on its own line. So in here, I'm going to press enter before the parentheses just to move it to another line. And this trailing button, let's add a button. Let's use the string protocol approach. We've done buttons in previous videos. Let's do add. And in the function, let's press enter. And very simply, let's just append one word to the fruits array. So we'll do fruits.append. And here we'll add maybe coconut. So now every time we click on this button here, this add button, it just adds the word coconut to our list. So in the preview, let's click the add a couple times and we can see that coconut is adding to the bottom of our list. Of course, if this was a real app, I would make this some kind of function where we go to maybe another screen or a text field, and then we can actually change the word that we want to put in here so it's not always coconut. But this works for now. And like we've done with our other functions, let's extract the function here. So let's add the func at the bottom. We'll do func add, open and close parentheses, open brackets. And let's just call fruits.append coconut inside. And in our button, let's just call the function add. So now our logic for adding is down here. And now this works, but I want to take this one extra step further because I personally just try to make this body as neat as possible. And we can shorten this trailing button. So instead of having all the logic for this button here, I'm going to make it its own variable. I'm going to extract this button from the view. So let's just add a var add button of type SumView, open the brackets. And remember, this SumView is the same thing as the body, SumView. And I'm just going to cut the button, paste it into the add button. And in the trailing, we'll just call add button. And then we can just make this one nice and neat line. So we just have our leading and trailing. Now we didn't have to put this button down here, but personally, I prefer it because look how nice and neat this body is, and we have all of our extra logic underneath. So if we need to change this add button, we'll just change code in here. If we need to change one of these functions, we'll just change the function logic down here. Now before we end this video, I want to just show you guys some of the formatting that we can do in our list. So first, let's add another section to our grocery list. Let's create a vegetables array, so we'll do @state var veggies of type array of string. And we'll set this equal to array, and in here let's just add some template vegetables. We'll do tomato, potato, carrot, doesn't really matter. And in this list, underneath this first section, let's add another section. We will add section. Let's use the header and content. The header will do text of veggies. And for the content, we'll press enter. And we'll add a for each. Open the parentheses, use the ID completion. For each veggies is the data \self for the ID. And then the content, we will just press enter, remove this, and put veggies. And in the text here, we'll put text veggies dot capitalized. So now we have two sections in our preview, and we can see fruits and veggies. I want to note that we're not going to add this on move and on delete to the second section because these functions are referencing the fruits array directly. They're not referencing the veggies array, so it wouldn't actually work. We'd have to make some modifications to make this for the veggies as well. So we're just going to leave these as two different sections for now, and the second section is not editable. I'm adding this section right now just to show you some of the formatting things we can do. So by default, we have this default list style where we have these collapsible fruits and veggies sections, but we can change this list style very easily. So at the bottom of the list, I can call .listStyle. And if I start typing in list style, there are a whole bunch of different options here. And I believe we're on the default list style right now. So if I press enter on that, open and close the parentheses, I don't think it's going to change. Doesn't look like it. So this is our default list style, but we can change it if we did list style, and maybe we did grouped list style. This is one of my favorites. Press enter, open and close the parentheses. And now we can see that it looks a little different. The header is kind of grayed out and the rows are going all the way to the edge of the screen. We can do other ones. We can do list style. Let's do inset group list style. Looks pretty nice. Open and close the parentheses. And now it's kind of the same. We have the grayed out section headers, but the actual content is kind of in these nice group bubbles, which looks pretty good. One thing I want to note to you guys is that when you're adding these list styles, they are adaptive. So if you're looking at a list style on maybe an iPhone, it very well might look different and have a different appearance on an iPad or on a different device. And that's done on purpose, and it's usually to your advantage because Apple has made these styles adaptive for different devices. But as a developer, you should be aware of this because if you're testing your app on an iPhone but you're also going to deploy it on an iPad, make sure you're also testing it on the iPad because it might look different and it might not look how you want. Again, it's usually fine, but just check that out if you're using some of these list styles. For example, the sidebar list style looks like this, looks pretty default and normal on an iPhone, but if this were an iPad, the sidebar list style is going to look completely different. So just be aware when you're using these list styles that it might change and it might adapt for different devices. So let's just put the list style back to default. So I'm just going to comment this out. So we're back at the default list style. And I want to just show you guys how we can customize some of these list rows. So first we're in this navigation view. And on the navigation view, we have these navigation bar items, which is the top left and top right. So if we want to change the actual color of these items, we can just add .accent color, and we'll add a color here, .red. And now all of the items within this navigation view, including the list, will have a default accent color of red. Now if we wanted to only change the color of the list items, so the section titles here, we could also add a accent color to the list. So we can call .accent color, and let's do .purple maybe. So now the accent color on the list is taking priority for these list items. So that's how we change the color of this accent color, but we can also change this actual content here if we want. So if we wanted to customize this header, we don't need to just have fruits here. We can put whatever we want. So if I press enter before and maybe enter after and put this fruit on its own line, let's embed this fruit maybe in an H stack, and maybe let's add an image, system name. Maybe we'll do flame.fill. So we have like a little flame icon there. And then we can make these, we can change the size, we can change the colors. So maybe let's, on the H stack, let's add font.title. Make him bigger. It looks a little too big. Let's do headline. And let's add maybe foreground color of, what other color do we have? Maybe orange. So just to show you guys, you can customize these section headers as well. And lastly, we can customize all of these items within the list as much as we want. So right now we have just text of fruit. But this could be, instead of a text, you could add a shape, a picture, an image. You could add your own extracted subviews. So if this was a real app, I would probably make a custom row and then put that custom row in here. But for now, let's just edit this text directly. So maybe we want to change the color. Let's change the .font to maybe .caption, make it smaller. So now these are nice and small. Maybe we'll add a background. Let's add a background to the text. We'll do .background, and we'll add color.pink. And we can see the background here. So maybe we'll make the foreground color .white. So we have white text on pink background. And let's make that background as big as possible. So let's do .frame, max width, infinity. And maybe max height, infinity. And what I wanted to show you here is that although we are changing the background color of the content in each row, and we're making the frame as big as possible, it's going to infinity width, to infinity height, it's still not covering the entire list. And people run into this problem all the time. They're always wondering, how do I change the actual background color of an object in my list? Well, there's actually a modifier specifically for list backgrounds. So I'm going to actually comment out this background color pink, comment out this frame, and underneath this on move, let's add .list row background. And here we can actually change the actual background of the list items. So here I will add color.pink, and we don't need this max width or anything, and now the whole background is pink, as you can see. So I'm going to just delete this frame and background, and maybe I want each of these items to be a little bit bigger. So let's add .padding, .vertical, just to add a little more space to each item. Let's make this back to blue so it doesn't clash with our colors. And you can see here we can still swipe to delete an item, we can add an item, we can edit and move items, and of course we can customize them. We didn't do a very good job customizing it, we just used very basic colors. But now you know how to use lists, how to use sections in lists. We can change out our list styles, we know how to add navigation bar buttons. And most of all, we are now experts at adding the onDelete and onMove functions to a list. So in your apps, essentially you can recreate this same formatting by using a VStack and adding custom formatting to it. But if you ever have a time when you want your users to have the ability to swipe to delete, or you want the ability to edit and move items, I highly recommend using a list, because it will be much more difficult to try to add these functionalities to a VStack than just use these built-in functionalities for a list. So thank you guys as always for watching. I know this was a longer video. It just felt like I should put all of the list stuff into one video rather than breaking it into two. So it just ended up making this video a little longer. But I hope you guys learned something. If you did, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button if you're enjoying this content. And as always, I'm Nick, this is SwiftUI Thinking, and I'll see you guys in the next video.